Hi, I'm Jon Leslie, and I'm here today with Alli Óttarsson. It's good to see you again, Alli.
Good to see you, Jon.
And Alli is former production director at CCP and then later at Riot Games. He's on to other endeavors now, which we'll get to in a minute. So that being said, we mentioned CCP, we mentioned Riot Games. What's your experience for the audience? What's your experience in game production overall?
So I was at CCP from the get-go, and the game was released in 2003, and I was there until 2012, at which point I joined Riot Games, originally as the development director for League of Legends, but then went on to manage production and development managers across multiple games.
Yeah, so what exactly are you up to now?
So now I am focusing primarily on video game startups, and so involved with quite a few, both here in Los Angeles and also in Europe.
Very cool. Can you talk about any of them specifically?
They are mostly in the kind of like online PC multiplayer space.
Okay, great. Yeah. So can you tell us, or can you talk a little bit about when you first started using Favro and how that came to be?
Yeah, so Favro was born after I came to Riot Games, and so we started using Favro pretty organically across a bunch of different teams at Riot, anywhere from game production, pods, to esports production, to publishing efforts, to just how we were doing running the company. You would see a bunch of teams all over the place using Favro. And then it came to a point where we elected Favro to be the one tool to use for anything. So we had our predominant suite for video game production, and then Favro for just teams to get up and running quickly. And then what happened was that we also started to use Favro for kind of like coordination across teams. So on our biggest video game effort, we used Favro to kind of like do the large scale feature road mapping, and then on our largest platform endeavor, we used Favro to orchestrate, coordinate across multiple games.
And then I remember coming in to visit you just right down the street here.
Yeah.
And talk about, you kind of had a mishmash of different tools. Some people were using, lean kit. Some people were using Trello.
I think we probably have every tool available in usage by some teams. And there was a big drive from the business just to get to one tool for a bunch of different reasons.
And none of that was security vetted, and then we did the whole.
Yeah, that was definitely an aspect of it. To varying degrees, those were.
Yeah.
So I think one of the biggest benefits of Favro at the time was that it was passing all of our security requirements with flying colors.
What makes it different from other tools in that it's uniquely suited to the games industry?
I just think I think it's just because the creators came from the game industry, and so therefore they know how to kind of like both build it and position it.
That's right.
And so I think unlike more generic tools that you kind of like run into it a little bit less when you're trying to do things that are specific to any aspect of game production, or even just like running game businesses or game studios.
Yeah, and just the fact that, like you mentioned, at Riot, how it was used by so many different teams across the studio, that kind of speaks to its flexibility.
Absolutely, yeah.
So
I think I cannot think of any type of team that was not using Favro at Riot, and so
that's pretty incredible. Your years in the game industry, how have you seen it change from business models to production practices?
Yeah, well, I think it has changed on a bunch of different vectors, but I think one of the most obvious one is just the size of everything has grown. Like the number of games being released per minute, the number of like the game developers working on a single product, the amount of revenue across the industry as a whole, like everything is growing.
Become massive.
So it has become massive.
Yeah.
And I think at its core, not a lot of has changed in terms of like how we are focusing on finding and delivering fun. And so the kind of like nuclear or the nucleus of just like finding a good solid core game loop and then building on that hasn't changed radically, right? Even
That's
though
the core of it.
Yeah, even though the platforms have changed and like
Business models have
business
changed.
models have changed.
Because you uniquely, I think, CCP, one of the first essentially free-to-play games as a service, live.
I wouldn't say the first. I think what we were pretty early on were that we were, self-published, direct to consumer.
Yeah.
Like we certainly were not the first free-to-play, and so CCP was pretty late on the free-to-play model. But at the time there were only.
Because it wasn't free-to-play at first, was it?
No, yeah. But I think, more uniquely, when I was at CCP and I was sharing production practices, like you said, at GDT talks and with studios, including Riot at the time, there weren't many companies that were doing self-published, direct to consumer, right? Direct to player.
Right.
I think it was CCP, Wargaming, and Riot Games, or something like that.
Basically.
Yeah.
So as far as having a tool or a combination of tools that can support all the various aspects that it takes not only to develop and create content, but to literally run a game studio. Can you speak to that a little bit? Because there's so much more to it now, especially when you're working in something that's an ongoing live game than just making the product.
Right. Yeah, I think those are two different things. Making the product and running the service on one side, and then running the studio on the other side. And in my experience, then running the studio aspect, the tool selection there became natural to Favro because of it just flexibility, right? So it was very easy to open and define work and get going on work. Right?
Because I can imagine that the development, the ongoing content creation, all of that has to be more and more closely tied to marketing, to the business, the services side. Because it wasn't, I spent a lot of time just doing AAA game development where development had very little contact with marketing, very little contact with publishing, very little contact with the actual business of games. And it was literally just kind of threw it over the fence, and you didn't have much to say about the marketing or contact with the marketing.
Yeah, I think though in that sense the culture of having marketing work closely with development and production has always been true, and I think that's driven by the fact that these are games that are being directly delivered to players, where the companies are the publishers, and so there's no need to have boundaries or walls and so they have the ability to structure in a way where we're publishing marketing, brand can even sit right next to the development teams, and that's how it was at my previous employers, even well before any tool was being used. Yeah, so I totally feel that Favro helps in that sense. Before Favro, we had created bespoke tooling, both at CCP and Riot to kind of like get better visibility around that function.
So where do you see things heading in kind of the game development industry as a whole?
I think there are so many kind of like layers to that. I think there are new platforms, both in terms of streaming and then XR, I guess we call it today, and the kind of like confluence of those things coming together. I see a lot of kind of like resurgence around the MMO and like, you know, and building really strong social experiences. You know, there's probably a dozen like really ambitious projects going on right now that are gearing towards creating super compelling, immersive, somewhat infinite scalable virtual worlds that are leveraging the fact that we can now do more compute in the cloud, more simulation, or even distributed graphics and stuff like that.
Yeah. What would you say your kind of 3 favorite capabilities of the tool are?
How easy it is to get up and running, how nimble the backlog management of it is, if you will, and how you're able to very organically structure your domain in the tool, whether it be your organization or your team structure or your relationship between strategy and execution. It's hard to describe that as a singular feature, but it's really the backbone of Favro, how you can kind of like build things on top of each other.
It's kind of like building blocks.
Yeah.
But you've got these different kind of pieces with backlogs and boards, and you can have different configurations of them in collections, and the cards can exist in multiple. There's so much flexibility.
Yeah, I mean, just like, you know, the card in Favro can represent like, you know, the largest and the smallest thing in the world, and how you kind of like, you know, couple these things together is limited only by your imagination.
It's true. Yeah, it's true. It's not prescriptive in any way. It doesn't say you have to set it up like this.
Right. And
this is a bug, this is a task, this is a feature.
Yeah. There are many tools out there that are more prescriptive, and it's often funny to see some of the Twitter memes and quotes from people in your position that are like, you know, driving consultancy and adoption of those things, and a common one is it's often the most prescriptive tools that do the most damage to how teams are run or how businesses are run.
Yeah. True. So to wrap it up, do you have any words of wisdom, advice to people currently in game production, people aspiring to be in game production? Yeah, I don't know where to start. Would you recommend going into game production if you want to get into games?
I think people who are passionate about games really should go into working on games. I think what's really compelling about our industry is that a lot of people who are making games are huge gamers, and so I think that's cool. And in terms of game production, I don't know. I like make sure to not focus too much on what you're delivering, but what the delivery actually drives. And so have outcome specific view rather than outcome
outcome
specific view. And I think that nut is once you crack that as a producer or leader of a team, then that goes a long way.
So do you see game production as its own unique discipline?
I guess there's an aspect of the merging the creative and the engineering aspect of making games that makes game production so unique, or makes it unique, I should say. But in today's world where content or like interactive content exists in so many different avenues that are not only games,
Right.
and then those lines start to blur very quickly.
Yeah, and it will always be a challenge bringing together something that requires so many different disparate disciplines.
Yeah.
And that's, I think, a lot of what game producers bring to the table, helping to make that happen.
Yeah, I think there's like, there's an element of creative endeavors, and but games are not the only creative endeavors.
Sure, not the only creative endeavors.
Yeah.
All right, well, that's it for our time.
Yeah.
Thanks very much, Alli.
Yes.
For taking the time to do this.
Absolutely.
And great to see you again.
Yeah. Good to see you too.
Cheers.